Well-Dressed Lael and his story as the Tattooist of Auschwitz. Welcome back, mere mortalites, to another book review. The book reviews that transcend you beyond mere mortality. Today, I want to be talking about the Tattooist of Auschwitz. I think it's called the Tattooira, or I'm probably pronouncing that terribly wrong in German, by Heather Morris. Now, I have read previously this book a long time back. I'm talking perhaps 2 years ago, and I believe it was published in 2018. I really enjoyed that book last time, but I skimmed through it, so I thought I really want to read this again, especially because Heather Morris had a subsequent sequel to this book as well, Chilka's Journey, which I'm sure I'll be reviewing in a later time frame. But I wanted to go through this again for a couple of reasons. One, I really did enjoy the book last time, so I wanted to go through it one more time and be able to extract a little bit of information for us mere mortalites out there as well, but also just be able to be ready for the subsequent sequel that I mentioned earlier as well. So, what is the Tattooist of Auschwitz? Pretty simple explanatory session from the actual book, but let me just tell you a little bit about it. It follows a man by the name of Lael Sokolov. So he's a well-dressed charmer, as the book may say, and he was transported to Auschwitz, Birkenau, in 1942. Now, the story, and probably to step back, the actual book itself, it's a combination. So Heather Morris actually interviewed Lael later on in his life. And now Lael, not to give something away, but he eventually made his way out to Australia after sort of coming out from the camps during World War II. And Heather was able to interview him over a period of time to put together this book. And this book is a mixture of fiction, and I'll probably get into what parts are fiction and reality, essentially basing the story from the stories that she was able to uncover from Lael all the way through to his experiences getting to Auschwitz and Birkenau, going from there, actually not so much escaping, but actually getting out when the camps were, I guess, liberated, you might say, although liberated is a interesting word there, from the Russians or by the Russians. And then sort of traveling across broadly, trying to get back home, and the journey that eventuated from that. So you got to take the story, and at least I took it with a little bit of a grain of salt. So where all the pieces in the story are true. Look, they might not have been. They were just stories that they were told. And I've actually read in other places that there's particular items where Heather has put this together based on what Lael told her. And then she was able to extract some other things to make it into a story form. So the book itself, The Tattooist of Auschwitz, it's in story. It goes from a first-person view of Lael, how he eventually got to Auschwitz, how he met Gita, basically the love of his life, right as he saw. And there's some photos at the back as well of the two of them, and you get to see right at the tail end. But the story is a mixture of romance, as well as living his life as what became to be the Tattooist of Auschwitz. It goes into the story of how Lael found himself into that position in the first place. So there's a mixture of, he was a gentleman that knew a lot of languages. So I believe he knew at the very least German, as well as a lot of other languages as well. So that lent him to being put into a position that he could be the tattooist. And now in that position, and while it wasn't made clear throughout the book, at the tail end of the story, as Heather sort of talks through more around the afterword and how it was sort of describing this information or getting this information from Lael, it was pretty clear to see that there's a lot of aspects of the story that sometimes you don't hear typically. The typical story that you hear from Auschwitz or from World War II and the camps is, here was the grim, terrible times that I have. And it didn't seem like Lael had that altogether as much. So he had the ability to, not steal, but actually get diamonds and emeralds from other people, so he could trade it with workers to exchange it for food and be able to give it back to other individuals. And at the same time, he wasn't overtly punished, although, as much as you want to believe it, everyone was, being punished and suffering in those camps. But again, back to the story, it goes through to Lael meeting Gita, as I mentioned. The story also showcases Gita, which is sort of the love of his life, and the other people around her, including Chilka, Ivana, I believe, and other ladies. Now, those particular aspects of the book, those I would believe they're more fiction, because this is just stories that Lael has told her, and from the information that she's gathered around who she was and how she acted. Now, the story continues on in basically in a sort of monthly sort of cycle. It goes all the way through, and you get to experience when Lael is found to have all of these emeralds and diamonds hiding away in his unit, and he's dragged away. I believe it's to Unit 11, which is the unit where they basically punished people, where they tried to get anything out of them, whether they'd done something wrong or said something wrong. But it just so happened that Lael had met Jakub, the big American guy who had he tattooed originally, and he'd been able to give him a little bit of food, seeing how he was a big guy. And it just so happened that they'd put him to work in that unit, which was to actually beat as many people up as possible, to either exchange something out of them or basically kill them afterwards. And it was after that particular point in the story, I think, there was a guard that basically looked after Lael in all of his tattooing and whatnot, that uttered the words that not many people, if at all, ever actually make it out alive. So there was other quite brutal sceneries in this book as well. One where someone is or they asked Lael, can you go into one of the crematoriums where all the dead bodies are, to try and identify, an arm and a number to be able to say, okay, who exactly was this number? And there's a lot of aspects as well through the book of just, him tattooing people, what that experience is like, holding people as carefully as you can, but, all the same, the items that he had to sort of edge into someone's skin. It was pretty brutal, and it gives you even an idea, even though it sounds like it might be, you're doing something that's supporting what the evil players in the roles were doing. He was also doing it for the fact of just trying to stay alive. Obviously, the book keeps on coming through all the way to the liberation by the Russians. And then I reckon this was I don't know how true this next points are, obviously, from Lael or the story they got told, but he basically kept on walking through trying to get back home, got picked up by some Russians, got taken into a castle. He basically became this suave man where he had a guard that looked after him. So the Russians weren't, being super good to him. They were like, okay, you're going to help us out. And if you keep helping us out, we'll keep you alive, but we'll feed you better, and we're not going to be beating you and whatnot. But they gave him this super nice outfit to dress, and his whole job was basically to go out, find girls to bring back home so they could party with the Russians in this castle that they were looking after. And he did that for such a period of time that, the bodyguard or the guard who was guarding him, they trusted him enough to say, okay, cool, you go out, you go get the girls, you bring them back, until he decided at one point, okay, excellent, he dressed up, got all the money that he'd been basically hiding from these trades that they were doing with emeralds and jewelry, drove up into the center of town where we'd normally go, basically left the car running and just kept on walking until he could go and find a train, got on the train and got all the way back home. So that's basically the essence of the story. Obviously, this sort of stories for me, I always enjoy. So for me, I was always like, oh, yeah, such a cool story. And I feel like every single one of them has some particular experience where you go, oh, wow, I couldn't imagine in Man's Search for Meaning. There's a lot of information around him, having conversations with doctors. Here for me, it was that particular story of, even though it was after Auschwitz, it was, going to the Russian castle and helping out the Russians, and then, making his merry way to go all the way back home. And so eventually, as I said, him and Gita got together, they found each other, and made their way over to Australia. And I do know that he, maybe not recently, but he has passed away, Lael, and so has Gita as well. So a little bit into the themes of the book, and for me, there was probably just two big takeaways. One, romance or love can be found in the strangest of places. So it was just interesting to note from the book how the love that he had for Gita, or straight away he saw her and saw through obviously the body, the image that she had, because a lot of these people had been shaved or had been maltreated, and if you can imagine, skulls and bones, how attractive you can be. Perhaps you can be a lot, perhaps you're not. But he saw straight through that. He kept referring it to in the book, it's the eyes, and he was really attracted to her eyes. And even in the conversations they have, the intimate moments that he finds to have in a random unit or by the side every Sunday that they get to go aside, you get to see, romance and the love can flourish even in the most unexpected of places. And the other one for me was atrocities knows no bounds, and sometimes survival can mean supporting the very thing you object against. And it was just evident to see that sometimes what you think you might not ever be able to do is something that you have to do to survive. And, I could imagine that the conversation that Heather would have had with Lael directly would have been a tough one to get him to get that information out, because some people might view it as, he supported the evil, the thing that you shouldn't be supporting, to continue on living and to have a life that was probably slightly better than those that others might have had going through that period. I believe he got a few more rations of food, so he was able to survive better. And by better here, the contrast is, not like you're living a lavish life. No, you're just probably more able to survive a very tough winter. And he was there for a long time. It would have been 1942 to 1945, 46. So he was there for many years. I think it was 3+ years that they kind of took his life. So, and sometimes you have to do things that you're not proud of. And not even so much Lael, but maybe Jakub, the other individual, the big guy. He got put to work as pretty much an enforcer, as a beater of people, a beater of Jews and other individuals. And he did what he had to do to survive. And he also makes mention of that book. So it's just a theme that ran through the book. And it's an interesting one. I'm not too sure what to think about that particular thing. For summary, for me, the book, The Tattooist of Auschwitz, 7.5 out of 10 for me. I enjoyed it more than the first time I read it, which was interesting. And it is very much a page turner. It is a book that you keep on wanting to read for me. The mixture of fiction and probably what is reality is blended in really well. And I do enjoy Heather's writing style. There are aspects of it where it becomes a little bit dull and repetitive, but all by the by, enjoy the book. So that's all for now, Mere Mortalites. I hope you enjoyed the review of The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris. Would I recommend you to get it? Sure. Why not, if you want to go read it? Obviously, leave a link below on how you can actually go do that and support us along the way. There's all the other links as well, whether you're watching right now through YouTube or listening through an audio platform. I thank you very much for taking the time to listen in, and I hope wherever you are in the world, you have a fantastic day, afternoon, or evening. Mere Mortalites, Juan out.